What's going on, guys? It's Zimzilla99, and today I will be doing a benchmark power scaling video, and this will be, in my way, kind of a time capsule to 2017 as to my thoughts on Godzilla 2014 versus King Kong 2020. I know that's when the movie will come out, 2020, so that's the name I'll be giving King Kong. And from here I will be comparing the two characters as analytically as possible. I will, however, have to go into more speculation when it comes to King Kong, when it comes to his size and abilities. However, I will try the best I can without going too much into territory where it is just flat out unsubstantiated claims. But more importantly, let's get into the video. Now, I'll be comparing Godzilla, and then I'll be comparing King Kong, as well as some kind of misconceptions, as well as trivia-esque kind of information about the characters within this universe, as well as I'll be doing showa comparisons at the end of the video. So starting off with Godzilla 2014, his height, he is 108.204 meters, and that is without rounding. However, rounded, he's 108 meters, but that is the exact height. His exact length is 167.74 meters long, and he weighs 90,000 tons. He's an ancient alpha predator that thrived during the late Permian period over 25 million years ago. However, it is stated that he comes from a time when the Earth was much more radioactive. We do not know more specifically if this is referring to a time period that we do not know of that existed before the Permian era or during the Permian era as a sort of sub-epoch of some kind. However, we know the Permian is some of the earliest assumed date that Godzilla was around. This creature is not a mutation and can serve as the holotype of its species and is most likely the last of its kind in this universe. So Godzilla is not a mutated dinosaur and not kind of mutated animal of any kind. He is radioactive, however, he is really a natural marvel and a force of nature, to be sure. For weapons, of course, he has his atomic breath, which is a destructive stream of superheated radioactive plasma. However, this breath is not like other Godzilla beams and can be affected by electromagnetic pulses, so any kind of certain EMPs with enough kind of pulse to them will cause the atomic breath to be much weaker. However, we have seen the full powered atomic breath in the comic Godzilla Awakening, so the benchmark for his atomic breath is shown there. For durability, he tanked a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb. He can have at least 5,876 psi pushed onto his entire body as he has been submerged near hydrothermic vents, which is where he was gaining radiation after the Permian mass extinction event. For physical abilities, he pushed and lifted a monster that would have exceeded 50,000 tons. His tail is strong enough to catch a flying target out of the air and slam it through a skyscraper that is built to survive earthquakes. He's amphibious and can descend, surface, and pretty much move faster than 230 miles per hour, which is the recorded speed of most American subs as well as battleships. However, they can move faster, but Godzilla exceeded both battleships and submarines. His weaknesses, however, include his gills being a very soft spot in his body, as well as also he can experience blunt force trauma in a way, and he can be pinned and exhausted. However, I will go into more why Godzilla was exhausted later on in this video, but let's move on to King Kong. King Kong is a large megafauna gorilla-like creature that lives on Skull Island. He is established as the last living member of his species and is a still-growing adolescent. As of currently, his height is 31.6 meters and his weight is 158 tons. I will also bring into account the scaling to him to the 1962 King Kong from the movie King Kong vs. Godzilla 1962. That King Kong's height is 45 meters and its weight is 25,000 tons. And that's a really strange disparity of only 13.4 meters, but 24,842 tons. However, for comparison, I will try to scale up the 62 stats to be comparable to 2014 Godzilla, which leads to him being around 103 meters and his height, or weight I should say, 95,000 tons. So he'll weigh more than Godzilla if we scale up the 62 Kong to 2014 Godzilla. And once again, this is all an assumption. We do not know if this is what they'll do. They'll just try to copy 62 Kong stats and put them onto this Kong for his final adult stats. However, this is only an assumption, and I think possibly King Kong might be smaller, but I'm being very, very generous, or I should say conservative, with this statistic by only scaling up to 62 stats. I should also make note that Kong is a mutant and a genetic singularity of his species, as his adult parents were comparable in size to him during the events of Skull Island, and were able to take on skull crawlers, which Ramorak is a member of. He is indeed an adult skull crawler, and in shown in the comic where one of the team members of Monarch gets a vision, he does see the battle that took place on Skull Island, and there are several adult Kongs fighting adult skull crawlers, and they are comparable in size when scaled to both Ramorak and King Kong during the events of Skull Island. For abilities, he is extremely strong. He can also jump great distances, at least 250 meters with build-up. He is able to survive heat, and he was able to swim a little bit through a lake that was set on fire with napalm. However, this did weaken him and cause him to pass out. So he is pretty durable, pretty strong. He is more willing to use objects as weapons and use them at close range, as shown with a chain from a ship with its rotor, along with stripping off a tree to use it as a kind of bat-like object. His weaknesses, however, is that he has no range projectiles. He can be exhausted if hit with extreme heat. His palms, head, and feet are not covered with as much hair and are susceptible to slashing and biting damage. Now I'll be going over certain kinds of misconceptions as well as information that should be important when analyzing these two characters when facing each other in preparation for this 2020 movie. Both Kong and Godzilla were brought down after extreme force and trauma. However, they were both recuperating after which, and were able to go on fighting afterwards, which both took place over the course of several hours, which carried over into the next day respectively. As in the case with Godzilla collapsing again after killing the female Mido, and Kong collapsed and unconscious after being taken down by the Skullcrawler and the napalm. However, both recuperated quite well, as Kong was able to go on to fight the Skullcrawler and defeat it afterwards, which was pretty much during the midday to early day, and Godzilla during the early to midday rose up and went back into the ocean after defeating two kaiju. Godzilla in 2014 was fighting two kaiju that had evolved adaptations to counteract his species' adaptation of the atomic breath. So his atomic breath was extremely weakened, however it did have a significant amount of force, as it was able to push the female Muto back twice and cause her to be knocked down, and he was going to shoot her again. However, the male did intervene, which would cause the male to be killed by Godzilla when he slammed his tail into the skyscraper, killing the male Mido. However, he was able to fire the atomic breath down the female's throat and decapitate her, which shows a great amount of force. And although the atomic breath, like I've said, was not at its full strength, it still has a force that is around 1 tetraton to 7 tetratons, around that level. And his breath can tag several targets at over a few hundred meters away. I should also mention that Godzilla's tail whip was faster than the speed of sound when striking the male Muto, which is what caused the strange audio cue, giving him a supersonic attack speed. I should also mention that Kong, despite being a gorilla and having large arms in comparison to its body, is strong, but Godzilla is not a dinosaur and has significantly large arms in comparison to its body for a reptile, and should not be comparable to any other creatures with similar proportions or dinosaurs, as Godzilla is, like I've said, not a dinosaur. So trying to compare a dinosaur's arm strength and scale it up is a logical fallacy. Also, comparing Kong and Ramorak's fight to Godzilla vs. Kong, as Ramorak is a reptile and Godzilla is a reptile, is also a bad comparison, as Ramorak has no energy-based attacks and is 3 meters smaller and 58 tons lighter, and has no arms. So that should be taken into account as well. As I've already stated, Kong's palms are very sensitive, as they were indeed cut up by rotary blades, so that should be taken into account if he was to grapple or be bitten by something with sharp teeth. Kong does have subsonic speed on foot, as his running speed was extremely strong and his jump was incredibly fast. In terms of striking strength, when striking the Skullcrawler with objects as well as punching him himself, he is around a large building level striking strength. Kong also, like I've said, was able to survive boiling temperatures. However, this is boiling water, so like many things, that should be taken into account, as the boiling temperature object that we were talking about is the Mire Squid's ink. However, we do not know if the Mire Squid does an adaptation where it starts to heat up after it's excreted, or if no matter what, it's always boiling inside its body, as Kong stepped on the squid, which is what caused the ink to secrete, which is what killed the squid in the first place. So we do not know if the ink was already present within the body and squirted out after stomping on its head, or was the ink a defensive mechanism, We do not know that for sure, however, that should be taken into account when thinking about that scene. Lastly, I will go on the Showa comparisons as well as misconceptions of any kind. I will say that Godzilla had not moved since 1955 and had not fought another monster since 1955. As such, he had not done anything for over 7 years as he was trapped in ice. Godzilla had not become accustomed to electrical discharges, which was one of the main reasons why Kong was able to overpower him with his electronic hands, or however it was that the lightning was granted to him. Any kind of electrical discharges were not really something Godzilla could tank. However, he did become accustomed to it later on in the Showa series around 75 and 74 respectively. Godzilla did not hit Kong directly with his atomic breath. He did hit him a few times near the chest, which singed his fur. However, the most direct shot he ever took was over his shoulder, which is why Kong grabbed his shoulder as well as near the side of his head, which is where the atomic breath singed his fur. However, Godzilla did not score a direct hit ever on Kong. Godzilla at the end of the film was buried and wouldn't be unearthed until 1964. I determined this by watching both Godzilla vs. Mothra and Godzilla vs. King Kong. And what you do is that you listen to where Godzilla is approaching from and the direction he's moving towards, which is Shizuoka, and which is where he fought Kong, and he's moving towards Nagoya as he follows the coast towards that area. As what you would do to analyze this is that you look up where both of those areas are, as well as the direction needed to get from that city to the next. Godzilla's strongest strength feat is 52,800 tons. That would be lifting Hedorah, while Kong's strongest strength feat in the Showa series is Godzilla at 20,000 tons. Showa Kong, although being able to swim, was not built for combat in the water, which was detailed in the script for the canceled film Operation Robinson Crusoe, King Kong vs. Ebra, which would later on go on to be Ebra Horror of the Deep. As King Kong would defeat Ebra twice like Godzilla did, however, King Kong would have had a harder time of it as, like we know, Kong has no energy-based weapons, and unlike Godzilla, he does not swim as much. When comparing the two, I think it's interesting how a lot of people interpret this battle. However, if I was to give a estimate without any kind of plot or devices, blah 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 blah, no matter what, I say statistically based on the facts and scaling up King Kong to the stats I gave him, I would say that Godzilla most likely would still win. I say this because Godzilla still has a longer reach both with his tail and with his atomic breath, both of those being a big contributing factor. Godzilla's atomic breath is not like napalm, it is much hotter and is also a plasma. The radiation does not come into account. Kong's not going to die from radiation poisoning or anything like that. So that is one contributing factor. Another contributing factor is that Godzilla, like King Kong, is incredibly strong. Kong might be stronger than Godzilla. We cannot say that for sure. We've seen Godzilla with stronger strength feats than King Kong in both his Showa incarnations and other incarnations of Godzilla in comparison to King Kong. However, this is due to the fact that Kong has always been scaled down in comparison to his original film, as most King Kong films are based off the 1933 film. However, Godzilla and King Kong both have around similar strength feats, and if we are to give Kong a similar ability and strength to Godzilla, with giving him the same strength feat of 52,800 tons, I would still say that Godzilla might not be able to be grappled or thrown around similar to Ramrak, as, like I've said, Ramrak has no arms, as well as was much lighter than King Kong, and was relying heavily on just using its mouth, as well as wrapping around Kong, while Godzilla having both its mouth, its arms, and having extremely big legs, which would be for support and lifting strength, and its tail for counterbalance, is going to be at a severe advantage to King Kong, who, although being a gorilla and incredibly strong, is still going to have a tough time fighting against Godzilla. I should also mention that although King Kong is fast, Godzilla is shown with a subsonic attack speed, being able to tag a fighter who was flying out of the air and smack him into a building. And although we do not know Kong's current durability during the events of the film in 2020, we can say even if we scale it up to Godzilla's strength feat, the ability of the atomic breath is still a major contributing factor. Like I've said, we don't know exactly how everything's going to go down, but statistically, Godzilla has a more likely chance of winning, although the same could be said for 1962. However, there are other contributing factors in that film which led to the outcome, but I digress. Those are my opinions. This is a benchmark for power scaling these two characters. We do not know what will happen until 2020, but these are my best guess estimates and scalings. I hope you all enjoyed. Links to the artist's sources below. Like this, Subscribe if you haven't. Like my DeviantArt, my Twitter, all that good jazz. I am Zimzilla, and I will see you all next time.